Just ahead, there's another edition of the Florida Roundtable, a service of Florida's Talk and Entertainment Networks. I'm Reagan Smith, Public Affairs Director of the Florida News Network.
And I'm raconteur and man about town, Al Spry. Ken Blackwell, you may know that name from up in the Midwest circles. He ran for governor of Ohio, and he'll be on the show today.
One of the most successful black politicians in the state of Ohio, and he's a Republican. Well, we're going to ask him what he sees happening, where is the party going, what do they need to do now that they are in control of the Congress. He has some insightful responses for you. If you'll stay put, the Florida Roundtable begins in a moment. This is the Florida Roundtable, a service of Florida's Talk and Entertainment Networks, and in the Orlando area of Tough TV 38. I'm Reagan Smith, Public Affairs Director of the Florida News Network.
I'm political commentator Al Spry. Tickled pink to be with you, Reagan.
Always a pleasure, and a belated Happy New Year. Here we are. It's 2015. Wow.
I am, I've got to say that this is we record this show, of course, a few days before we air it, but it is Gay Marriage Week in Florida, the 36th state to welcome gay folks to become married. And I have a couple of quotes from Joan Rivers in honor of this occasion.
All right.
This is a quote from Joan in 2009. Gay marriage. I'm so against it because all my gay friends are out, and if they get married, it'll cost me a fortune in gifts. That's one.
All right.
And then the other is, I hate gay weddings. I'm thrilled about the equal rights thing, but gay weddings are like the war on terror. They go on forever. Gay weddings are a lifetime commitment for the guests. They start at 7 and end in October. Why? Because stereotypes be damned. Gays love parades, right?
And you know, gay people are now going to have the right to enjoy and appreciate the right of divorce court.
And, of course, the gay industry and of the marriage industry, especially in Orlando, in Central Florida, we service this whole state, but in Central Florida, I believe it's the fourth largest gay population in the country.
I think so, yeah.
And it is also a wedding bonanza town.
Oh, yeah.
And some part of the country with Disney and the wedding industry of DJs and halls and cakes and flowers and dresses. And, you know, all that stuff. That's profits, baby. It's all about the profits. Yeah. So everyone's cheering, you know.
You're absolutely right.
And so I don't know. I think that it's just going to be in all 50 states soon. We're in it's in 36 states. 70% of the population now are in states where gay marriage is legal. I never thought I'd see it in my lifetime. I didn't think the wheels would move that quickly in that regard. Reagan, you?
It's just like a snowball. It started to roll downhill. It's moved much faster than I ever thought either. And I would now say that I would think we're going to see it in the entire country in our lifetime.
Now, it's interesting, Jeb Bush's take on this gay marriage thing. He changed his position ever so sneakily.
Okay. All right.
First story was, we have to respect the rule of law. Okay, but now he's saying that, of course. But the original Jeb Bush quote was, it should be left up to the people, right?
Yeah.
It ought to be a local decision, this is the quote. I mean, a state decision. The state decided, the people of the state decided, but it's been overturned by the courts, I guess. And then the new quote is, we live in a democracy, and regardless of our disagreements, we have to respect the rule of law. I hope that we can also show respect for the good people on all sides of the gay and lesbian marriage issue, including couples making lifetime commitments to each other who are seeking greater legal protections, and those of us who believe marriage is a sacrament and want to safeguard religious liberty. If that's not a political answer, Reagan, I don't know what the heck is.
And I wonder how much influence that position shift had on Florida's current Attorney General, Pam Bondi, who now all of a sudden is looking at gay couples across the state of Florida and saying, we wish you the best.
We wish you the best, but I did everything in my power to prevent you from getting married.
Yes.
But we wish you the best now that I've lost, and, I don't want to be out on my butt. I want to have a future
She still
in
wants
Florida
that shot
politics.
She's looking for that shot to be the first female candidate for governor of Florida.
Reagan, it's always interesting in this state. The shifts, the policy shifts, the hypocrisy is always interesting. And what would our state be without it?
That truly is a fact, Al. We're I tell you what, we're going to we'll take a little bit of a pause along the network line here, but our guest today is a gentleman by the name of Ken Blackwell. He was the mayor of Cincinnati, very successful in state politics in Ohio. Many years, Ohio was considered a safe state for the GOP. I think more recently it is considered to be a swing state. George W. Bush carried it a couple of times. Barack Obama has carried it a couple of times. But Ken was the first African-American to be a candidate for governor in Ohio, and he's a Republican. So we're going to have some very interesting questions for him. He'll have some interesting responses. I'm Reagan Smith.
I'm Al Spry.
This is the Florida Roundtable, and we'll continue in a moment. We're back. You're listening to the Florida Roundtable, the service of Florida's talk and entertainment networks, and in the Orlando area of Tough TV 38. I'm Reagan Smith.
And I'm Al Spry.
And Al, as promised, we are off to Ohio, where we are joined by a politician, an activist, a gentleman who was the mayor of Cincinnati. He was the Ohio State Treasurer. He was the Secretary of State of Ohio, and he was the Republican candidate for governor of Ohio in the year 2006. And we want to welcome to the Florida Roundtable Ken Blackwell. Mr. Mayor, good morning.
Hi, it's good to be with you guys.
Well, we appreciate your spending this time with us today. And before we get started, now I kind of did your political resume there a little bit. If you would, go ahead and take the first minute and tell us a little bit more about yourself, your educational background and your role in Ohio and like that.
Well, I was born and raised in Cincinnati. Had the pleasure of graduating from the Cincinnati public schools. I won a football scholarship to Xavier University, where I played 4 years. And as a matter of fact, later on in the year, I will be inducted into the Xavier University Athletic Hall of Fame, which means that we did a pretty good job of destroying all of the records.
Well, according to my info here, you were invited to the Cowboys training camp.
Oh, absolutely. And those guys had me to come to camp and actually signed me to a standard NFL contract, which was for the ridiculous numbers of $13,000 the first year, $15,000 the second year, and $18,000 the third.
How times have changed.
Yeah, absolutely. They wanted me to be to compete for replacing the great Leroy Jordan, but he decided to come back to camp, and those guys, Landry and Gil Brandt, wanted to make me an offensive lineman. They hadn't outlawed head slapping, and I decided that I would save a little brains guy.
Well, you probably made the right choice if you've seen all those recent lawsuits about head injuries in the NFL.
Oh, well, absolutely, because part of my background that you didn't mention is that I left local government. I went to the federal government, where I was an undersecretary at the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development with my good friend Jack Kemp. And Jack was very interested in the head trauma incidents in the NFL. And I just tell you, it's a real problem. But anyway, I decided to come back, went to graduate school, later became a faculty member at Xavier University, and then an administrator, later on one of the vice presidents of the university, then went back into the federal government. Long story short, war. I've just been blessed. I've been blessed to have opportunities to serve at every level. I've traveled the world, served as U.S. ambassador to the United Nations Human Rights Commission under 2 years under President George H.W. Bush and a year under Bill Clinton until his minions caught up with me. So.
Let me share a personal story with you, Mr. Blackwell. I left Ohio in excess of 35 years ago, but I was a radio and TV reporter for the Storer Broadcasting Company in Cleveland for many years. And when you were the Ohio State Treasurer, some of that time, Ohio had a governor named George Voinovich, who went on to was a United States senator. He was the governor of Ohio. He was the mayor of Cleveland. And when I was working in the Cleveland City Hall, George Voinovich was the county auditor of Cuyahoga County. And I still hear from him around Christmas time. He was a remarkable man, and you served in the state cabinet with him at that time, and so I feel a little bit of a connection there.
Oh yeah, and George was a good friend. I was mayor of Cincinnati when he was mayor of Cleveland. We both served on various committees with the U.S. Conference of Mayors. When I was coming out of the Clinton administration, coming out of my job as U.S. Ambassador to the United Nations Human Rights Commission, George contacted me and said, Ken, look, I want to offer you an opportunity to be the treasurer of the state of Ohio. He said, I know that you're a penny pincher and that you are a guardian of the taxpayers' dollars, and I want you to be the treasurer. He said, but that means that you will have to stand for election, and it hadn't been lost on either one of us that there hadn't been any blacks elected to statewide office, executive office, up until that point. And I said, George, as long as you're willing to work as hard as I'm willing to work to get reelected or to get elected, I'll accept that. And so in 1994, I became the first black to be elected to an executive office, statewide office in Ohio. And it was all due to the opportunity that my good buddy George Voinovich offered me.
Well, I'd like to dive right in to some interesting topics. Want to get your take on some things. Of course, today is the first day in Florida, becoming the 36th state to allow gay marriage. And it looks like you were obviously in support of an amendment. We had an amendment here in Florida which banned gay marriage, and I think in Ohio as well you were involved with one. So I wanted to get your take on this and see where you see this heading and what your thoughts are.
Well, again, I am disappointed with the widespread judicial activism that's leading the charge to overturn the decisions of people in our respective states. If you take a hard look at the number of times that the people have had an opportunity to speak, it is clear that most Americans in their respective states believe marriage is a union between one man and one woman. It's been activism from the bench creating a new and unfounded right to redefine marriage. And there's no such constitutional right to redefine marriage, and judicial activists shouldn't be making this decision. The people of our respective states should have that opportunity. So I think this issue is going to be before the Supreme Court in this session, and hopefully this will be resolved in a way that restores the power of the people to make that determination.
Now let me ask you this as a follow-up to that. Judicial activism, of course, ended the practice which was supported by southern states of African-American people and white people getting married. Wouldn't you say there's a similar issue here and a correlative issue?
No, I wouldn't.
Why not?
Well, because fundamentally, there is the Declaration of Independence, which frames our Constitution, says there are some fundamental self-evident truths, and that we are all as individuals created equal. And the Constitution, and as you look at it, the people across the country, in concert with judges on the bench, made a decision through an orderly process to change the Constitution. If someone wants to change the Constitution, then they can go by the process that's been established, and we can have that debate across the country. And if, in fact, those who believe in same-sex marriage win that debate, then that changes the rules of the law of the land. And I am a person who believes in the rule of law. I wouldn't embrace it, just like I don't embrace abortion on demand, but that would be a constitutional process by which people could change the let's call it the rule book of our nation, and that's the Constitution. There is no equating the inherent dignity of the individual, regardless of race, with the creation of a new fundamental right to redefine marriage. That right just doesn't exist.
Yeah, but isn't it a form of redefining marriage when you decide same sex, or if two people of different races could get together and get married? There is something to that. And also think about from this perspective, if you will, the courts are a check on the balance of power as one of the checks.
Well, here's the problem with
Sure.
with that. Here's the problem with that line of reasoning.
Okay.
If in fact any two people can marry, and love becomes the basis upon which marriage or the union of marriage is consummated, then what stops two men and one woman, or five women and one man, if in fact they truly express love for one another? Where do you draw the line? You can't. What stops that from happening? What stops the slippery slope? When love becomes the basis upon which you say you can define marriage, then one man, one woman, another woman can't be where that stops. And so, and I think all you have to do is to look at what's sitting on the bench right now in terms of, or let's say sitting on the table in terms of lawsuits ready to go, whether it's in Utah or Arizona. There are those who are ready to say, as soon as we resolve this issue around same-sex marriage, then we have to move to the next level of saying, what's magic about one-on-one relationships? Why not one-on-three, or two men and four women? So that's the slippery slope and problem with that line of reasoning.
Well, let's. I just one more thing, and then we can move on. But what about with the Mormon community? If they decided in Utah to pass a law saying that you could have more than one wife, which is of course a precept of some sects of Mormonism, not the mainstream Mormonism.
Well,
and would that be the rights of the state, though?
There's an interesting history there, in terms of when that territory became part of the Union. They moved away in terms of agreement on marriages of any kind other than one man and one woman.
All right, I tell you.
I think that's at the point that we begin to say love is the basis. I am sure somebody in Utah will say, okay, then let's revisit, the group marriage.
We are talking with Ken Blackwell. Let us remind you that this is the Florida Roundtable. I'm Reagan Smith.
And I'm Al Spry.
And we will continue this conversation following these messages. From Pensacola to Key West and all points in between, you're listening to the Florida Roundtable, a service of Florida's Talk and Entertainment Networks, and in the Orlando area on Tough TV 38. I'm Reagan Smith.
And I'm Al Spry.
Our very special guest this day is Ken Blackwell. He is the former mayor of Cincinnati, served as the treasurer of the state of Ohio. He was also the Ohio Secretary of State from January of 1999 to January of 2007. He was the first first African American to be a major party candidate for governor in Ohio, and a very successful Republican activist in the state of Ohio through all of those years. And Mr. Blackwell, it is certainly a pleasure to have you with us this day. We thank you for your time. I want to ask now, for the first time in a number of years, the Republicans have both houses of the Congress, the House and the Senate, and by fairly comfortable margin. They actually increased their margin in the House, and they picked up 9 seats in the Senate. So now they're in control. The president is a Democrat. What do they do? Where do we go? What do you see happening?
Well, they first have to change their mentality. The Republican Party is the majority party in the country. They're not a minority party. And all too often, they have relegated themselves to playing small ball and acting as if they were still in an extreme minority status across the country. We have 30 governorships. We control both chambers of the state legislature, House and Senate, in about 26 states. And so by definition, we are America's majority party. I think we have to, in a true American spirit, we have to take on this president that is a big advocate of growing government. I like to tell people as I crisscross the country, the president and I measure success in 2 entirely different ways. He tends to measure success by the number of people you can put on welfare, and he is proud of the number of folks who I think we've hooked on food stamps. Well, I think success is found in the number of people you can transition off of food stamps. The president likes to talk about the inadequate numbers of jobs that he's created without talking about the fact that for every 3 full-time, good-paying jobs that we lost, he's replaced it with 4 lower-paying jobs. And so the labor participation rate and the rate of underemployment in our country is those numbers are at staggering low rates, and that's why all of the happy talk about the uptick in the economy is not heard outside of the Beltway.
Well, of course, that's politics, and I would like to find out, what is it to get us back? What do you think it is to get us back on track? Because we've been losing jobs, and you can't blame this all on the government, obviously. This is the private sector deciding they don't want to provide the same level of compensation and benefits that they have in the past. They'd rather hire 2 part-timers than 1 full-timer. They'd rather outsource jobs to India, China, South and Central America. So, I mean, let me just finish this thing here. Mm-hmm. If you have an exodus of jobs and job opportunities, and it's not all government, it is private sector as well. So how do you fix that? How do you stem it and reverse it?
Well, you get smart. Look, we live in a capitalistic system, a free market system, and the money that is sitting on the fence right now, it's about $2 trillion. Mm-hmm. That money belongs to stockholders and owners of businesses. It is their money.
Sure.
And capital seeks the path of least resistance and greatest opportunity. And so when you have an administration that is proud of the fact that it is burdening the economy with reams and reams of regulation, capital is going to stay on the fence. I think that, you take a look at what they're getting ready to do with the EPA. You take a look at the president's war on coal, and we begin to say, look, we want to push us towards energy independence, not just an abundance of production. We want true energy independence, and coal is a part of that. We want to get our economy growing again, and the cost of energy back at at a competitive advantage for the United States economy, and we can do that. When you begin to look at the burdens, not only of red tape, but of lack of common sense of Obamacare, the Affordable Health Care Act, I tell you, this new Republican majority in Washington needs to do what they promised that they would do, and that is to take on Obamacare. That should be the top priority, repealing Obamacare. And we know that the president will probably veto it, but then you go and you take it step by step, and you send a signal to those businesses that now are downsizing and reducing the number of hours that people work so they reduce their exposure to this burdensome health care red tape. Then you begin to get people to invest back into the economy and invest back into their workers. And that's the way you move capital. You're not going to force people to invest back in this country when it doesn't make economic sense for them to do it.
Well, let's go before Obamacare. Let's talk pre-Obamacare. Why wasn't the investment done to the levels that it should have been done previously? Let me ask you this. If we have this $2 trillion on the sidelines and we have these owners who want to get by with the least amount, obviously, what's to change their mentality? Say you remove the regulations. Say you remove Obamacare. What's to say they won't come up with another reason to keep money on the sidelines? Because maybe they just like money and they don't want to invest it in their employees any longer.
Oh no, that's never been the case. When the incentive and opportunity to invest in this country is equal or greater than the incentive to invest elsewhere, people invest in this country. We are the largest, the most robust economy in all the world. We are not perfect, but our system is perfectible, and it starts with common sense right in Washington. Or the problem has been the lack of common sense.
Well, I could agree with that. There is a lot of lack of common sense in Washington. It seems that, we've entered an era of this oligarchical thinking of, I want to call it to a certain degree soft fascism, if you know what I'm saying. And, it has to do with the fact that you don't see a lot of difference even between the parties.
Well, I think that's the opportunity that the Republicans have in front of them right now. And whether Majority Leader McConnell and Speaker Boehner will rally their troops to paint in bold colors and put us on a different track of economic growth and meaningful job creation is what the American people are waiting to see. I will tell you that I've been disappointed so far, as I started out by saying, with the small ball mentality of the new team. I will be watching with bated breath, like most Americans, to see if in the first 100 days these guys, these men and women, are ready to take us down a new track deeper into America's third century, where we maintain our competitive advantage and a focus on what I consider to be the greatest collection of individuals in all the world.
Let me ask you this, by comparison, in the midterm elections in the Clinton administration, after Hillary had worked on this huge health care reform thing and the Republicans grabbed hold of it, and for the first time in 40 years, the Republicans take over the House of Representatives based on that. And Clinton's response is that the era of big government is over. And he basically starts talking, he's going to balance the budget, and he's doing welfare reform, and he essentially is stealing the Republicans' clothes coming out of that midterm election, and then gets himself reelected to a second term. I haven't seen really any response from the Obama administration to the shellacking that they took last November when Bob Schieffer said to the president, "What happened?" The president's answer was, "We got beat." So I tell you what, I want you to think about that. And do we see a door opening here for opportunity and whatnot? We need to break again along our network line. I want to remind folks that this is the Florida Roundtable. I'm Reagan Smith.
And I'm Al Spry.
Our very special guest, the Honorable Ken Blackwell, and we'll continue in a moment. You're listening to the Florida Roundtable, a service of Florida's Talk and Entertainment Networks, and in the Orlando area on Tough TV 38. I'm Reagan Smith.
I'm Al Spry.
Our very special guest is the Honorable Ken Blackwell, former mayor of Cincinnati, treasurer of Ohio, Ohio Secretary of State, the first black cabinet member in Ohio history, and the first major party candidate, African-American party candidate as a Republican for governor of Ohio. And Ken, I had was talking there as the last segment ended. When the Clinton administration took its shellacking in midterm elections, President Clinton announced that the era of big government was over. The Obama administration has taken a shellacking in midterm elections. I heard no such announcement. So what should the Republicans, is there an opportunity here for them?
Well, there is an opportunity, but we have to start with the understanding that President Obama is probably the most ideological president in the last 40 years or so. And his tax and regulatory instincts have created a hostile investment environment, like we were speaking in the last segment. And so the opportunity will be, will the present Republican majority, the new Republican majority in the Congress, do some things that will send an early signal. The Keystone Pipeline, they need to get it done. Follow through on their promises of reining in Obamacare, and not just taking a meat axe to it, but show that they can actually, take a surgical knife to it and cut out the most destructive, cancerous parts of it, and get us moving again with a focus on growing our economy, creating jobs, and educating our folks. These are not just passing statements of convenience. They have to be action on the most fundamental and enduring principles of our 238-year history.
Congressman John Boehner, the Speaker of the House, is from your neck of the woods. He's from Southwest Ohio there in Cincinnati. Your input, have you attempted to try to counsel him a little bit? Are you talking?
You can't counsel John.
He's been a guest on this show, by the way.
You just have to. You have to, as his old football coach used to say, you just got to lead him in the right direction. And so I think that he's going to hear loud and clear from more and more of his membership that they're ready to keep the promises that they ran on in the last election, and I think that he and Majority Leader McConnell, who is also from the greater Cincinnati tri-state area, will get the message and will start to point us in the right direction.
Along those lines, Steve Scalise, House Majority Whip, in trouble. Went to speak in front of a white supremacist group about 12 years ago named Euro, a David Duke-backed group. We have a Republican talk host calling, conservative activists calling for his removal, like Mark Levin, Eric Erickson, Sarah Palin. What is your take on Steve Scalise? Damaged goods? Is he going to go? And I wanted to, of course, see where you stood on that one.
Well, I think he has become, and that has become a distraction, and as opposed to talking about the things that we're talking about today, there's been an inordinate amount of energy, time, and effort put against damage control with Representative Scalise. At the end of the day, people that I know who work with him, and I don't, basically say that he is not a racist, and there are folks on both sides of the aisle who have stepped up. Whether he tried to initially say that this was he apologized for something that he didn't need to apologize for, that's problematic for him. If in fact he was basically pleading that he didn't know who the group was, and he did speak there, I think that's a problem for him. And so at the end of the day, the speaker and his team and the conference have to make a decision as to whether or not this has become too much of a distraction. Look, Congressman Byrd was a grand dragon.
Right, in the KKK.
We can go on. Al Sharpton. Do people think that Al Sharpton, doesn't play the race card, hasn't in fact whooped up racial tensions and anger, and he has full access to the White House? At the end of the day, the people who work closely with Scalise will have to make a judgment, one on his character and the believability of his explanation, and then get on with the business of running this country.
All right. Hey, we have run out of time, sir.
Unfortunately. But our guest has been Ken Blackwell. He's the former mayor of Cincinnati, treasurer of Ohio Secretary of State, the first African-American to be a major party candidate for governor of Ohio as a Republican. And we certainly have enjoyed the conversation, and we hope that you will come back and do this with us again soon, sir.
Look forward to it.
This is the Florida Roundtable. I'm Reagan Smith.
I'm Al Spry.
And Al and I will be back with a brief closing thought after these messages. This is the Florida Roundtable, a service of Florida's Talk and Entertainment Networks, and in the Orlando area on Tough TV 38. I'm Reagan Smith.
And I'm Al Spry.
And I enjoyed that conversation with Ken Blackwell. I hope we can get him to come back here and do that again in a few months.
Yeah, he's an interesting guy. He's very toes the conservative line on the answers are very similar whenever you talk to a conservative, it seems. And I'm sure when we talk to our liberal friends as well, we get similar answers as well. There's always that thing about, we always hear about judicial activism, and we always hear about if only the regulations went away, everything would blossom and jobs would be had and wonderful jobs. And I don't know. To me, it always sounds overly simplistic, Reagan.
No,
and I guess that's the speech of politicians, right? It has to be overly simplistic. I think we live in a much more complex world, though. I think we live in a world that's geographically diverse, that is economically global now, and I don't think we're ever going to get back to the 1950s, although all the conservatives think we can.
Well, you do have to get people to understand what you're saying.
Yeah, that is true.
You can't talk over their heads.
Yeah, but I wish people would read a little bit more so you would be able to try to use bigger words. Steve Scalise, damaged goods, of course, we mentioned this earlier in the interview with Ken, and it sounded like he wants Steve Scalise to go.
It sounded that way to me, too. I think, despite the fact that it's been a dozen years, he is damaged goods.
Well, I think that if you want to have an inclusive party and not just a party of old, white, straight guys and gals, although mostly guys, you really need to open it up like Reagan did.
Yeah.
Ronald Reagan, not Reagan Smith.
Well, the big tent. You have to have, as we have talked, you have to have a leader who is willing to stand up and say, if you believe in A, B, and C, all of you people are welcome.
Yeah, but we're not seeing that in the Republican Party.
Yeah, they don't seem to have
If you're gay, stay away. If you're black, stay away. If you're Hispanic, stay away, unless you're a good-looking Cuban guy like Marco Rubio.
In which case, Well, of course, I think his presidential ambitions may be sinking for this time around. I certainly don't see Marco and Jeb doing the same thing in Florida the same year, So, but it's a long ways away yet. We'll have to kind of see what happens. Al, we're going to have to run up the white flag here and call it a show for this week. The clock does tend to run on us when we get going here. Scheduled to be with us next week, Congressman Dave Weldon, Dr. Dave Weldon of the Melbourne area. I'm Reagan Smith.
I'm Al Spry.
We'll see you next week with another edition of the Florida Roundtable.
You've been listening to Florida Roundtable, a weekly look at issues and problems of concern to Floridians from a state, national, and international perspective. Presented by the Florida News Network with your hosts, Reagan Smith and Al Spry. The views and opinions expressed during the preceding program are solely those of the participants and not necessarily those of this station's ownership, management, or sponsors of FNN. Your views and opinions are welcome. Address your card or letter to Florida Roundtable in care of Reagan Smith, 2500 Maitland Center Parkway, Suite 407, Maitland, Florida, 32751. Or you may email reagansmith@fnnonline.com. Thank you for listening, and please join us again next week for another edition of Florida Roundtable.